And now, Bob Grant.
WABC, New York.
Curtis SLIWA back at WABC. Almost slipped out WNYC there. Got into the habit, Kiki, of saying that for the past 146 shows. It's been 8 months that I've been on sabbatical. I've been able to go forward, develop my craft as an individual broadcaster due to the gracious time I was allotted at the city station WNYC. And now I return. And naturally, we'll have a lot to talk about because it's been months since we've been able to network and discuss the many issues that affect our tri-state area. Many of you had come to know Curtis SLIWA as part of the Lisa and Curtis team in the mornings. And then naturally there was a separation on a number of levels, but never a separation of the heart, because as many of you are the sons and daughters of the soil, born and raised, whose grandparents may have come from distant parts to make a better life for your children and children's children, one thing I always hope to do, regardless of the form of broadcast I'm involved in, is to weave the nostalgic, what was, with what is, and try to create pictures of how we can make a much better life in which we can all live and share with one another. And although it can be quite emotional from time to time, as it is for me, because I've got to acknowledge I'm not generally nervous on various occasions, but I was a bit nervous coming to Penn Station today. A bit gun-shy. No, not that I thought I was going to catch some lead outside. Don't get nervous, fellas. I realize all of a sudden security is up and at 'em here, but I was nervous in the fact that for 3 years in the mornings, we had basically shared our lives, Lisa and Curtis, with you, from the front pages, in terrible times, tragic times, and in times of just great euphoria. It was the best of times and the worst of times, and I mean, one can never forget all those occasions in which we were down and out, and the listeners were there, and the staff was there, and the management was there, and they acted almost in a surrogate capacity to sort of give us that extra little bit of oomph so that we could continue emotionally, because this is a very emotional type of a forum. When you're on radio, you're reaching out to people. They're allowing you into their homes. They're allowing you into their cars. They're sharing your words with their family, whether it's in the wee hours of the morning, where I will now be from 2 to 5, actually early Tuesday morning when I start, till late Friday night into the wee hours of Saturday morning, 5 days a week. But by you allowing me to share some of my knowledge, my input, my opinions with you, I think that's the greatest gift in the world you can bestow in terms of friendship. Too often we pay lip service to one another. We just glad hand one another. We nod at one another. But to allow those words to circulate amongst the many, my adversaries, friends, and those who haven't yet quite figured out who Curtis is and in what direction he's going, well, it's an unbelievable pleasure. When I walked in that door, even though my palms were sweating a bit, my knees were knocking, not quite knowing what to expect, well, the staff and everyone here rolled out the red carpet, and I knew I had made Joe Santisteban the correct decision, because they just filled me full of love. They welcomed me back. It's as if I had just gone away on vacation. And it felt that way, Kiki. It felt like a vacation. Although, let me explain to all of you that I left not a full broadcaster. I left not necessarily having perfected my craft. I left having had quite a few concepts to address in terms of being a better, well-rounded person, being more knowledgeable, and also being able to convey that over the microphone. And at WNYC, I was given that opportunity. So I thank the Mayor Giuliani, who some say muscled me into that position, but we know that's not the case. And to actually all those people at WNYC who found it quite difficult to accept Curtis SLIWA at first, thinking I was a Neanderthal creature, comic book reader, coming over from a commercial giant like WABC to plant myself, Sasquatch style, into the proper, pristine, highbrow atmosphere at WNYC. But actually, they were great, because they allowed me a wide range of latitude. And I think upon my return here at WABC, it will actually make a much better broadcast. Only time will tell, and I'm hoping all of you will have the patience. And just before we go to the phones, I definitely have to pay tribute to the King of Talk Radio, because some of you are not quite aware that the opportunity that was thrust at Lisa and myself came due to the generosity of Bob Grant over the years, first at WMCA and then at WABC, when from time to time he'd be away on vacation or sabbatical. He would actually give his okay to Lisa and Curtis substituting for him. And it was a tough ordeal. We did not take well to the medium at first. We made the classic mistakes. We had not developed our craft. We hadn't gone out to the chicken coops way out in the hinterlands of America and learned by trial and error. We didn't learn this craft by spending money to get a good education, to develop our academic credentials at university. We found that we were bestowed with a tremendous fortune when John Minnelli at that point made us the morning team here, and we will never forget that opportunity. Unbelievable. And we had to learn, oftentimes by slipping and sliding, but it was those initial opportunities that Bob Grant provided to us. And, as many will remember, from time to time, as he goes back into his memory banks and talks about the time that Curtis SLIWA and the initial group of Guardian Angels took him out onto the Muggers Express, the number 4 train, and then onto the number 2 train, the Beast, into the heart of East New York and Brownsville, Brooklyn, to the Livonia Avenue station. And he literally had a chance, sitting in an isolated car in the last compartment of that number 2 train, to know what it's like, whether you're black or white, old or young, to have to somehow try to survive running through the gauntlet of the many criminals. Vultures and buzzards out there would love to strip you clean like they would the carcass in the Mojave Desert. Great to be back. And let's go right to our phone lines from Connecticut, 203-862-WABC. And let me just mention, Bob Busey, the top flight producer here, has prepared a great show for us today. He's giving me that tactical air support. 203-862-WABC from New Jersey, 201-489-WABC. I've learned that's the heartland of the WABC talk show listening community, 201-489-WABC. And from New York, 212-563-WABC. That's 563-WABC. I've got a new time slot in the wee hours of the morning, 2 to 5. Maybe you can give me some advice as to the direction you'd like to see me go. You don't have to be an insomniac, or as I call it, an insomaniac, to be able to stay up to the wee hours of the morning and listen. And remember, the promise that was made to you, it must have been just about 3 years ago, almost to the day, when John Minnelli came before the airwaves and said, one day there will be 24 hours of live talk at WABC. And I know Lisa and I, we shook our head like, yeah, sure, John, right. And many of the staff were probably like horses going, yeah. But he's delivered, as has the management here at WABC, and in the signing of Curtis SLIWA to handle this new format and new program at a new time. You literally will have that opportunity from sun up to sundown to have live talk, local talk, pumped in your direction. And how many people can say within their lifetimes they've been able to deliver on their promises? Certainly not our politicians, but at least the management here has. And remember, like they have in the past, as they've brought other people back in the past, so too they brought Curtis SLIWA back. And when we return, we'll get to your many phone calls. And again, whether foe, friend, or in between, it'll be great to hear from you. Barbara, if we can. Welcome to the Bob Grant Show, Barbara.
Oh, congratulations that you're back, Curtis. I missed you dearly. My point is this. I am one of the dummies from New Jersey. Not one of the dummies that voted for Florio. However, when Assemblyman Seminario said that we are dummies, remember that the dummies in New York voted for Mario Cuomo for 12 years. It only took us one term to get Florio out of office, and I do assume that Assemblyman Seminario is one of those dummies that voted him in for 12 years. Incidentally, welcome back. Really missed you.
Oh, I do appreciate it, and a salute to the residents of New Jersey who did the right thing, who felt that they had been betrayed, who, I might add, not just on the part of Florio, but on the part of the Republicans who became the majority in the Assembly, You were promised initiative and referendum, remember?
I worked to get the vote out, and I think everyone, even today, Clinton is in very, very bad straits. I call my representatives all the time and write if I need write and do what I have to do. But I think all of the American people realize we are tired of this inefficiency, ineffectuality. This president is taking us right down the tubes. I mean, he's killing this nation. I am really upset.
All right, well, do appreciate that, Barbara. And again, initiative and referendum is being challenged in the Supreme Court due to a Colorado act, and it'll probably be determined by that court whether we trust you with exercising your full rights in democracy. But right now, let us go to Raul Izaguirre. Do I have that right, Raul?
Curtis, it's pronounced Raul Izaguirre, but that's very good.
Izaguirre, all right. President of the National Council of La Raza. And your organization has issued a report that says shows seem nowadays to lack representation of Hispanics. Would that be in all ways representation or just in positive ways on television?
Both. We've looked at a number of networks of all the four networks. We looked at particularly at entertainment television, but we found that we had a problem not only with the number of times that Hispanics are portrayed, but also with the fact that we were more negatively portrayed than any other group in this country.
Now, Raul, unlike blacks or other ethnic groups who feel that there's no balance, some might say that because of Univision and Telemundo and the huge international Spanish networks that beam their programs into almost all areas of urban America now, that is offset by the many positive images on Spanish television.
Well, the problem is that most Hispanics watch English language television, number one. Number two, we're not only concerned about what Hispanics receive, but we're concerned about how television portrays America to America. And in that sense, it's not a damage only to Hispanics, but it's damaging to Americans as a whole because it gives them a distorted reality, a distorted sense of reality.
Well, now, how has that changed? Because I'm 40 now, but when I was growing up, like many of our listeners, my hero was Guy Williams, Zorro, on television. I mean, my first 4 years, I grew up in Chicago on 47th and Rockwell on a 4-floor walk-up, and I used to put on the Zorro costume, act as if I had that machismo of the Hispanic male, and go up and down the walkway, and he was my hero.
Well, the good news is that in the 50s, 40 years ago, when you were watching television, we were about 3% of the images on television.
Yes.
That wasn't adequate, but it wasn't too far from the 7% of the population that we represented at that time. Well, we're now about 10, 11% of the population, but instead of being 3% of the images on television, we're now down to 1%. Now, so we've actually declined in that period of time.
Now, why do you think that has changed with a larger growing Hispanic population who has great equity? I mean, advertisers are frothing at the mouth to be able to advertise specifically to the demographics in the Hispanic community. Why is it that you think there are so much fewer Hispanic role models on television?
I speculate that there are a number of factors involved. One of them is the fact that we haven't raised our voices loud enough and aggressively enough and brought attention to this issue. Secondly, that there are simply not enough producers, directors, writers of Hispanic descent. That what we're dealing with is an elite category of people who seem to be shielded from what is happening in American society. I think it also has to do with the fact that America needs to portray some group as the bad guys, and apparently they've decided to choose Hispanics as the current people that they ought to paint as bad guys.
But in the 70s and into the 80s, it just seemed that if talent was there, it would somehow surface. Freddie Prinze from the Lower East Side of Manhattan and East Harlem went to Hollywood at such a young age and was a smash hit. I mean, he was universally regarded in America, according to the Arbitrons, with his sitcom, and yet then he took his own life. I remember there was Gregory Chano. Remember in Sanford and Son, he was the Hispanic sidekick. And then he was on, I think, Barney Miller. And he rose to prominence. It appears to me the vehicle has been there. Why is it that many more Hispanics may not be working themselves up the ladder in these stereotype positions that may eventually lead to a greater role model position?
I know of no industry that is so arbitrary and capricious as the entertainment industry in terms of selecting talent and promoting talent. I can tell you that from my experience with people in the media, people in front of the camera and also behind the camera, there is widespread anger and frustration. They feel like they simply do not get chosen very often, that roles that are specifically designed for Hispanics are rarely ever written, that there's a great deal of a lack of appreciation of Hispanic contributions to the society. Indeed, when I talked to one group of people who were in the business, 100% of them, these were very few people, but 100% of them had actually gotten into the business as a result of a consent decree that was signed in the late 60s, early 70s against the studios that allowed for Hispanics to come into the studio. So the only success we seem to have had has been a result of court actions, but not as a result of the talent naturally bubbling up through the system.
All right, Raul Izagera, President of the National Council of La Raza, thanks for joining us here on the Bob Grant Show.
My pleasure.
And I might add that with Natural Born Killers out, Oliver Stone, the great liberal. Remember, who created Tony Montana of Scarface, Al Pacino, the worst stereotyped Cuban Hispanic figure in America? The great liberal, Oliver Stone. Remember that. But right now, I am substituting as Bob Grant. Will eventually have a chance to do my first live copy, so stay tuned.
Branchville, New Jersey.
Oh, Branchville. I'm sorry.
Pleasure speaking with you, Curtis.
Oh, pleasure.
It's just so tiring to hear this Hispanic this, black that, yellow this, green that. We're all Americans. And I think that is the important thing. And things should be based on a person's ability and their qualifications. And you get so tired of the same old song. It's getting so worn out.
Well, you know, in the field of entertainment, we've seen James Olmos became very famous as the lieutenant, remember, on Miami Vice?
Uh-huh.
Had that great movie Stand and Deliver about Jaime Escalante, the mathematics teacher in East Los Angeles. Almost won an Oscar for that performance, showing how he could take inner city Hispanic youths and put them into a high-intense trigonometry class and actually have them compete for champion awards in mathematics in California. But he's also the same the same James Olmos who appeared in Zoot Suits, which was a Mexican gang movie, and a prison movie that he just did. Now, he's making money doing that, so who's exploiting who?
Yeah, it's such what's the word? It's such a carousel that we're on. And what it's leading to is not constructive, but destructive.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think we have to think we are Americans first. If you don't want to be American, why are you here?
True. And to those in Hollywood, many of them who claim to have liberal credentials, remember, they are the ones who are creating these negative role models.
Absolutely.
If we as Italian Americans, of which I am part of, are upset at our profiles in terms of the way we are pictured as mafiosa in The Godfather and in the many other pictures that have come out of Hollywood, well, who is it that is making these pictures?
Right, and who is paying to see them, Curtis?
Exactly.
And,
So
I think it's America first. That is my prime objective. America first. America and Americans. If you don't like it, you don't have to be here.
Now, Pat, though, when you use the term America first, you know it has an original connotation that frightens some because of the days in the 30s, right before the war, when McCormick of the Tribune Corporation out of the Midwest, the owner of the Chicago Tribune and other entities, Lindbergh, our great hero of the Spirit of St. Louis, and others who believed that America should only deal with American problems. Now, that was a mistake then.
Well, I can see that, but you know what the problem is, Curtis? We're not dealing with our problems.
Mm-hmm.
We're not dealing with our problems. We're throwing money at them, and that doesn't solve it.
All right. Well, do appreciate your call, Pat. And let's go to Lewis, who is calling from Brooklyn. Welcome. What a welcome. Next will be probably the harmonica man. Rico Radabali, I've caught you napping at the controls. Oh, you got it, huh? That's pretty mild compared to some of the things I had thrown at me in the 8 months that I was over at WNYC. Now, could this be Giuseppe from Long Island?
Yeah, welcome back. Penn Station feels safer already.
Thanks, Giuseppe.
Regarding Anthony Seminario, he showed more guts than I've seen any politician in this country by sitting there on the radio and taking all our calls. We know he's wrong about the Skivo's governor, but the guy has got guts.
No, can I challenge you on that?
Go ahead.
Is it guts, or is it he's afraid to lose the quality patronage positions that really fuel a politician's ability to keep getting reelected, that the governor has made sure will exist?
Tony's not afraid of nothing. He's not afraid of nothing. He's the only one that would go on the air and take that. Nobody else would do it. I'm dying to see. I love Senator Al, but is he going to take the wacko calls tomorrow like Tony did?
Oh, I think he will. I mean, Al D'Amato is feisty.
I don't think there are going to be many wacko calls because most everybody loves Al.
Yes.
But Cuomo would never get on the air with us.
Well, let me tell you.
He gets on PBS TV, and you can't get through. They want your name, your serial number, your address, your phone number. They want everything in the world, and then they don't talk to you.
Well, let me tell you how feisty Al D'Amato really is.
Oh, I love Al. No, I'm just making a point. I don't know if he would go through, even Al, as much as I love him, what Tony went through the other day.
Well, you'll have an opportunity, Giuseppe, tomorrow, along with all the other listeners, because he will be substituting for Bob Grant, 3 to 7, before Bob returns on Monday. Just before we go to State Senator George Pataki running for governor, got to tell you, it was the Jewish parade up Fifth Avenue, the Israeli Day parade, and I was there with the Guardian Angels. We ran into, at that point, there was Senator Al D'Amato marching with State Senator George Pataki running for governor and Jackie Mason. And D'Amato didn't like some of my comments at WNYC. And would you believe it? He got down and dirty with me right there in the middle of the crowd, cross-examining me, and he did not take a step back. Now, we agreed to disagree on what our difference was, but he is that way in private, as you see him often, publicly so demonstrative on C-SPAN and on the 30-second sound bites, and occasionally right here with Bob Grant on WABC. Curtis SLIWA substituting for the King, and we'll return with your calls, and also we'll be hearing from the Republican candidate for governor, must survive a primary first, and then take on Mario the Magnificent. Welcome to the Bob Grant Show, State Senator.
Curtis, it's great to have you back on ABC.
It's great to be back. And if I can, I'd like to share a moment with our listeners. A period of time, probably one of the most depressed periods in my life. The bomb had just been dropped on Lisa and myself here at WABC that we would no longer be co-hosts of the morning show. I think it was a Thursday morning. John was very polite, just broke it down to us very professionally. Lisa took it like a champ. I took it not well. And that night, I was making an appearance at the Yale Club to give a little presentation about George Pataki. And a lot of people said, George who? At that time, State Senator George Pataki, one of many who was running for the Republican nod. And I showed up, and I gave that speech because I really felt deep down in my soul that this is something that had to be done for the benefit of our state, regardless of what my personal emotional condition was. And you know something? I don't think anyone that night knew what had happened.
Curtis, nobody could tell. You gave a great speech, and afterwards you did tell me you had to call Lisa because of what had happened at the station that morning. But the way you were able to carry that out, coming in with some of your people and just giving a great speech is something I won't forget. And the other part that you don't forget is you're right. Back then it was Pataki who, and there were 9 or 10 different people out there running for governor, and you said I was the guy. And I just thank you for that, and I'm just very happy to have you back on ABC. You know, I'm going to have to just stay up to 2 o'clock in the morning now to make some call-ins to you.
Now,
keep things going.
that will test the friendship. I know you have a very solid relationship. I've met your wife and children, but will they tolerate this nemesis in a red beret calling up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning?
They'll kill you. I better call you at 3 in the morning, Curtis. But
now,
we can work that out.
Now, State Senator George Pataki, you've got the primary against Rosenbaum coming up. But should you be victorious, naturally you're going to need all the help you can get to muster the fight against Mario Cuomo. But an emotional division has existed quite some time between the forces who are allied with State Senator Majority Leader Ralph Marino from Long Island, and naturally your supporters, Al D'Amato and others from around the state. What is it that happened today in terms of that split relationship?
Well, you're right, Curtis, that getting the nomination and getting the support is something that never is as easy as you'd like. And during the convention, Senator Marino was on the other side supporting Herb London. And today, I'm very pleased that Senator Marino came to our headquarters, endorsed my candidacy for governor. He's enthusiastic about it. Earlier this week, Guy Molinari and Susan Molinari endorsed my candidacy over in Staten Island. And I think we're really seeing people coming together. And it's not so much, you said we got the primary on Tuesday, it's not so much winning that. We're going to win that. More important, we've got to bring together everybody who wants change in this state. Not just Republicans, but we need independents, we need Democrats, we need everybody who understands that we've got to change this state.
But to be honest with you, through the emotional turmoil of the battles you had with your own state Senate leader, Ralph Marino, on his budget negotiations with Governor Cuomo over the years, I thought it would be a dark day in hell before he'd publicly endorse you. I thought my boy, Rudy Giuliani, Mr. Republican of New York City, would be on board. What's going on here?
Well, we have a lot more in common than we disagree on. That was the case with Ralph Marino and myself. We want the death penalty. We want to cut taxes and spending. And I was confident that ultimately we would, that common ground would come together and we would put this behind us and work to change the state. And I think the same thing's going to happen with the mayor. I don't fault Mayor Giuliani at all. First of all, from the standpoint of mayor, I think he's doing a great job. And from the standpoint of politics, he's got to deal with the Democratic City Council. He's got to deal with Mario Cuomo. He's the governor. He's got to deal with the state legislature. And he has one obligation, and that is to be the best mayor he can be for all of the people of this city.
Yeah, but
and I think he's doing fine.
All right, but when you talk to the Giuliani people, they say, under their breath, that State Senator George Pataki has dissed them on 2 occasions when they were prepared to meet with you. And that has been aired out in the press. What are the actual facts about that?
That's not the case. We had a meeting set up with the mayor down at City Hall, and I went down. And we hung around for a while, talked with Peter Powers, the deputy mayor, who I think is just a tremendous guy and a great deputy mayor. And it turned out that the mayor had to go out to Queens. I believe some police officers have been involved in an automobile accident. We were down there probably an hour. We even did interviews on the steps of City Hall with Marcia Kramer and some of the other reporters, and met with in the hall with Herman Badillo, who was in the process of waiting for the mayor to come back to do a press conference on education. And we finally just ultimately couldn't stay. And it was understood that it wasn't clear when the mayor was going to get back. He did have that education conference, and we had to get on to a commitment we had on the agenda.
All right, but the mayor has been very vitriolic in terms of his a statement of why a schism exists between him and some of his fellow Republican colleagues. And as we saw, it was over his emotional embracement of the Clinton crime bill versus people like Guy Molinari and Susan Molinari, who endorsed you the other day. And he also hinted at your sort of vexing on the crime bill, not really taking a position. What exactly is your position on that crime bill that we have seen pass?
I think the federal crime bill should have focused on 3 areas. It should have focused on providing help for cities and local governments to put more police on the streets, provide more prison cells, and provide more prosecutors. And there are very good points to that bill, like, I believe, the extension of the death penalty to a number of different crimes, and the support for local governments to put more police on the street, and the creation of more prison space. And I think what Susan Molinari and Congressman Lazio from out in Suffolk County did fighting to cut some of the pork, fighting to get tougher provisions dealing with the release of sex offenders in that bill was right. I also think I'm not going to criticize Mayor Giuliani for supporting something he believes was in the best interest of the city. That's his role as mayor, and if it means he agrees with a Democratic president on one day or a Democratic governor on the other day, his job is to be the best mayor for the people of this city that he thinks he can be. With the changes that were made, the cutting in, for example, that $10 million for a university in Texas for a criminal justice center that was solely pork because the chairman of the committee happened to represent that university, cutting that $3 billion and much of the pork out of the bill, adding the tougher sex offender provisions that Susan Molinari and some of the other congresspeople were able to achieve, I think made it a better bill, and I would have voted for it.
All right, New York State Senator George Pataki, candidate in the upcoming Republican primary for his party's nod to run against Mario Cuomo in November. I can't wait for the debate because I know this won't be, as in the past, the candidacy of Andrew O'Rourke or the laughable campaign of Wacko Rinfrey in the prior go-round. But I know we'll be guaranteed a good discourse, a good exchange, and a good evaluation of the course of the way New York should go into the 21st century. And we'll be tapping into you from time to time, even if it's from the wee hours of the morning, I hope.
I'd love to talk to you at 3 o'clock in the morning, one of these nights on my way home, and I'm looking forward to sitting down one-on-one with Mario Cuomo and taking him on. Because, as you said, in the past, the other candidates didn't know state government. They didn't have the experience I had up there day in and day out fighting Mario Cuomo's policies, fighting his tax increases, fighting his spending increases, fighting some of his criminal justice policies that turned felons out on the street without serving one day in jail. So I don't underestimate Mario Cuomo. He's a great speaker and a great debater, but he's got a terrible record.
Well,
and we're ready to take him on.
Let the political battle begin. Thank you, State Senator George Pataki.
Curtis, thank you.
Appreciate it. And can't wait. If they can't get it on in the field of forensic debate, what about b-ball basketball? The governor fancies himself as quite a hoopster from Spaghetti Park in Corona. George Pataki, a lot of people don't know, was the starting center on the Peak Skill 5 high school basketball championship squad, and he's quite the tall guy. Sometimes you need an oxygen mask just to engage him in conversation. Curtis SLIWA, substituting for the king of talk radio, Bob Grant, and in Connecticut, 203-862-WABC. From New Jersey, 201-489-WABC. And from New York and everywhere else, 212-563-WABC. And to Eddie, we go from Bergenfield, New Jersey.
Hi, Curtis.
Good afternoon.
Nice to hear you again. Curtis, I'm a little upset with Mr. Pataki, something he said before, and I can't stand Mario Cuomo, so it's got nothing to do with him.
Sure.
What it has to do with, he said something, how good MTV is for New York.
No, excuse me. That was the mayor of the city of New York, Rudy Giuliani.
It was he who said that?
Yeah, well, remember.
Well, can I respond to it?
Well, let me explain, though. New York is hosting the awards. And the mayor, I think, sees it as a cash cow.
Right.
Like the Grammy Awards and like other awards that cities compete for.
In other words, like Playboy and Screw Magazine make money. He sees it as something. I would like to say that MTV is the most violent, antisocial, negative, counterproductive, demonic social influence ever to invade a culture in the history of the world.
Eddie, do you have any more adjectives ready to use in your description?
Did I get my point across?
Wow.
and he said something like he'll learn. He doesn't like it, but he'll learn it from his kids. Did he ever think of teaching his kids good music? Like old rock and roll, Broadway shows, movie themes, Disney songs.
You see,
there's such a great body of music out there. MTV has never had music since its beginning.
Eddie, you see, therein lies the problem, that many of our elected officials, Rudy Giuliani included, may not have a clue, as I don't believe he had a clue about midnight basketball, of which he was a great supporter. For instance, let me explain something, Eddie. You know where Gracie Mansion is over at East End Avenue off the FDR Drive, right below East 90th Street?
Yeah.
There's an old asphalt plant there, an athletic field with basketball courts. How do you think Mr. and Mrs. Rudy Giuliani would react if a bunch of white, black, Hispanic guys were jamming that ball up and down the asphalt court there till 2 o'clock in the morning, or the highbrow residents of East End Avenue? They would go ballistic. They would go nuts. They'd say an end to midnight basketball. I have the feeling that the mayor is not that understanding of the different elements that are sometimes woven into the fabric of an MTV production. The many criminals who are able to flaunt their so-called creative abilities and yet hide behind the gang garb, the drug garb, and the negative stereotypes that affect our young people, never mind the images of Beavis and Butthead that have sort of drawn their own little cult following.
I wish somebody could bring back music, and I know it can't get through because the powers that be are the very powers that won't let music get through. I mean, it's a horrific thing going on in the music business today.
Well, I'll tell you, Jay Diamond certainly tries to bring us back. Oh, man, Bing Crosby. I mean, tunes that I hadn't even heard. So I'll tell you this. This is what we'll do, Eddie, since I will be following Jay Diamond starting this Tuesday morning, 2 to 5 each morning until Saturday morning. He'll be passing on the baton. Jay sort of represents an understanding of the old traditional music forms, the theater productions and such. I am really more understanding of the brand new hip-hop, street jive culture that has poisoned the minds of our young people. And I promise you, we'll melt the two. Somehow, we'll find a common ground. Let's go, if we can, to James, who's calling from Manhattan.
Yeah, hello there, Curtis. I'm very glad to hear you're back.
Well, thank you.
Just to change the pace a little bit, Bill Clinton said that they were going to make the deadline October for the invasion of Haiti, which is, of course, a week before the election.
Yes.
Do you think that's the proper way to conduct foreign policy?
Well, I think I disagree with Bob Grant because I've heard him enough on this subject and most of the hosts here. I am for a full-scale invasion of Haiti and for putting Aristide back into power. I think if we are going to support democratically elected forms of government, we must go the whole 9 yards, of which at times we are unwilling to follow through on because we may have disagreements. In terms of Aristide, he's a liberational theologist. He is a leftist. There is no question ideologically. Had he a more centrist position, there's no doubt in my mind that the United States Marine Corps would be standing by at the palace in Port-au-Prince and having made sure that he was back in power. But I am in favor of an invasion now, not in October for political purposes. Your opinion, James?
Well, I'm struck by the fact that you would prefer to have an obvious Marxist in control, even at the cost of giving lip service to his democratic origin.
Well, let me ask you a question, because we had this experience before during the...
Castro.
Afterwards, when Kissinger, our Secretary of State, engineered a coup d'etat in Chile against the democratically elected president, Allende, who was a socialist, definitely a leftist. And we decided that although we were champions of democracy and we would let the vote decide who the leader of the Chilean people should be, we not only helped arm the insurgents, the fascists, Pinochet, the butcher, but we helped them in behind-the-scenes preparations in the storming of the presidential palace and in the eventual killing of Allende. Now, that was certainly not our proudest hour, and Kissinger has acknowledged in his memoirs being directly involved in those covert operations. Do you think it was better to have a butcher like Pinochet in power than Allende, although a socialist who had been democratically elected according to what we are advocating for third world nations?
Well, they're not similar situations.
Why not?
Because it's a very different situation in Haiti with
I see it not as a different situation at all, James.
Right.
In fact, I see it as a very similar situation, is that we choose our friends based on their politics, and when we decide on democratic principles, much of it has to do with the political outcome of the match. We were happy in El Salvador, were we not, that the rightist, centrist candidates won? We were happy in Nicaragua when Chamorro surprisingly defeated the designer-clad, eyeglass-wearing Ortega. We were happy then, but when all of a sudden it crosses our political purposes, we sometimes are not willing to use the might, the power of the greatest nation in the world to make sure that democracy reigns. And I'm hoping that Bill Clinton will get off his duff and do something proactive, even though it may be politically unpopular in our country.
What are you doing at ABC?
Well, I
moved.
was inculcated with culture. My pedigree improved. I had a little bit more balance on my 8-month sabbatical away, but I've come back, and I got to tell everyone out there, Frank Field, that you were actually prepared to join me, if necessary, at 2 a.m. in the morning on my inaugural program this Tuesday.
It shows you how dumb I am. What a cheapskate you are.
Let me tell you something, Frank. I know you're an old New Yorker. Do you know what my inaugural program will consist of?
No, I don't.
In the first hour, when Brooklyn boy Jay Diamond passes the baton to this Brooklyn kid from Canarsie, will be entertained by the old Brooklyn Dodger Symphony Band.
Is that right?
That's right. And we'll see how the rest of the listeners in the 30 states at that time of the morning react to the Peanut Gallery.
I want you to know that I was a member of the Knothole Gang.
Yes.
Used to go there regularly.
Oh, yeah.
Had us kids into the bleachers where it was sunny and hot. We'd bring our lunch and our dinner, and we'd sit there all day.
Yes, all the better days of Brooklyn and the city. But, Frank, you had a really personal experience in returning to the country of your grandparents.
Mm-hmm, I did.
And you've actually been able to put together the many episodes that have already aired on the news broadcasts and a compilation that I gather will appear this Sunday?
Yes, this Sunday at 11 a.m. from 11 to 12, we have a 1-hour program called Journey of the Heart. And what we did was we took the 6-part series that I worked on, and there were so many questions from people about this particular trip, whether they could go, what would they find, was it difficult traveling, should they go, should we forget the past, can there be a clue? There were so many answers that I was not qualified to respond to, so I asked Elie Wiesel to join me, and he spent part of that hour with me discussing, and he is an incredible human being. I think what he brings out is something that you began doing so long ago. I want to be serious at this point. You fought indifference. Mm-hmm. People turning away, not sticking out their hands and help, offering help. And it's indifference that is, as Elie Wiesel said, it was indifference. People turning away, not wanting to get involved, that cost so many lives 50 years ago. And I thought when I went to Europe that I would never find anything 50 years later. And it was a terrible mistake. I found more than I ever dreamt of.
Well, now, what were the circumstances of where your family originally immigrated from?
Well, my mother came to this country in 1910. My father came over just about the same time. But they left their families in Europe. Mm-hmm. And on my mother's side, nobody survived. She did bring one brother with her, but everybody else perished during the Holocaust and the war.
And from which section of Europe?
That was from Poland, a small village, a farming village called Dąbrowica. And my father came from what is now in the Ukraine, just east of a town called Przemyślany Łapiski. They had a big farm where he was brought up, and he left his older brother and his parents and came to this country. Lost complete touch, both sides of the family, prior to the war, during the war. And, of course, as children, we never knew we had any relatives over there. They were never brought up. You didn't talk about this in front of the kids.
Yes.
And it was kept very quiet. So, strangely enough, this voyage of mine began 50 years ago because I was a lieutenant in the Air Force, and I was based in outside of London, and then when the war ended, I was in southern France, and my father wrote to me and said, we have 3 cousins who survived on my side of the family, and they're in a displaced persons camp near Munich. And being 20 years of age, and a brash kid, I jumped into a Jeep, drove out toward Munich, struck out in that direction, had no problem, stopped at Dachau, and was horrified because there were still people there, and it was just a horror. And the MPs there directed me to a DP camp called Fernwald, where I did, by some crazy chance, miracle, found these 3 young men. We brought them to this country, and they're the only survivors.
Yeah. Now, Frank, prior to your service for the United States in the military, to the eye-opening experience of liberating death camp survivors, you mentioned that you didn't know all that much about the roots of
No.
your existence in Eastern Europe? You mean...
Absolutely none.
No.
My mother would never bring... If my father and mother were sitting at the table and they happened to get a letter once a year or once 2 years and get some packages to send back to the old country, they'd see us kids come in and they would say, shh, children. And they would not talk in front of us.
Now,
never discuss it.
Was this because of their experience as Jews surviving in that portion of Europe?
I think so. Well, I'll never know. I've spoken with my sisters and brothers, and they have the same incredible lack of knowledge about who our uncles and aunts were, where we came from. And when CBS said, would you like to go over and find out what happened? We were celebrating D-Day, and they called me in and said, we're sending Jim Jensen over to do the D-Day, and you were in the Air Force in those days. Would you like to go over? And I said, well, I didn't participate so much in the ground action or anything like that. I was a meteorologist, and it was a fairly cushy job for a kid. But what I did was I happened to get to some of the death camps, and they said, well, why don't you go back and find out what happened to your relatives? And I said, no, I won't go because I couldn't possibly find anything 50 years later, and I don't even know where to go.
Well, now, with the New Europe, the emergence, I had the pleasure myself of traveling through Poland, Belarusia, the Ukraine, and naturally to Moscow this past summer. Fascinating as they've taken on to the new form of capitalism for them.
Yeah.
But what were your experiences in those small villages, in those rural areas where time is almost frozen?
You've hit the word. Time is frozen. When I went there, my sister somehow found that my mother's family came from the town of Dubrovika. That's all I knew. We were able to find that village. When we got there, time was frozen because thinking that I'd never find anything, every one of the villagers knew the Berkowitz family.
Yes.
They knew the names of children that we never suspected had been born. The little girl named Hannah. They knew things that I just never dreamt of. And then the shock of it all was when one of them said, here comes...